everybody at St. Mary's wants to go in the Catacombs. And years ago, it used to be possible. Way back when, 4 students went in one evening, and so they were in there for an hour or so, and during that time, they got themselves not only separated, but they got themselves good and lost. So they were screaming and shouting, and after a while, 3 of them found each other, and they tried to locate the 4th one, and they hollered, and then they stopped hollering, and they hollered and stopped hollering to try to figure out where he might be, but they never heard a sound. So they came out and they ran back to Aquinas Hall, and they told the brother that was in charge of the hall what had happened. So he called the fire department and the police, and they came here, and they went in and started to do a search, and after several hours they could find no one. So by now we're well into the wee hours of the morning, and the maintenance supervisor said, let me go get some cans of paint, and we can try this again and leave markers of where we've been so that we won't double over areas that we've looked at already. So he did that, and to this day, in many of the places, you can still see the arrows that they painted along the cement walls, and they're not for any other purpose nowadays, except for that night when they were trying to find this student. They were now into the 2nd day trying to locate this student. There was no response to the shouts and to the calls and those kinds of things. Well, at the end of the 2nd day, way over by Augustine Hall, far corner of the campus, at least where there were buildings at the time, they found this student in a part of the catacombs that had actually been closed off. So how he got in there, we have no idea. But he was around a series of sharp turns, and when they found him, he was all curled up on the ground, and he was eating dirt. He had gone completely insane, and he spent the next 17 years in an asylum. I want to tell you another ghostly story about the theater here on the St. Mary's campus. The present theater is really fairly new. Years ago, before this present theater, there was an old barn-like structure up the street behind where the present theater is. So this story would have started there, but the story continues in the present theater. So there was a winter production that called for a little girl to play the part of Amy in this play. And on the opening night of the play, it was a cold and foggy night here in the St. Mary's area. Amy's parents were driving her here from Walnut Creek, and there was a terrible automobile accident, and all of them were killed in that accident. And so the play had to be stopped because there was no understudy for Amy, and the production was canceled. Well, the following year, on the anniversary of that night, the theater and the hauntings of the theater by little Amy began. And to this day, students who are in the various drama productions on the campus will tell you that Amy haunts the theater. She's a kind of friendly poltergeist. She turns the lights on and off at inopportune times. She changes the sound. She moves sets. From the top of the theater, she moans and she giggles and she distracts the actors on the plays during rehearsal. There's all kinds of other mischief that she does. Amy has become part of the tradition of the theater here at St. Mary's College. Those of you that have lived on the central campus know there are 3 tall buildings that are at least 4 stories high. And Augustine is actually the highest of the bunch. So Augustine Hall has an elevator, and while the elevators were convenient, they often broke or they didn't work properly. So in Augustine Hall, up at the top floor, one evening, there were several girls who were going to go down and put stuff in their car. And one girl was loaded up with boxes. So they pushed the button and they waited for a minute, and the doors opened and the girl in front, loaded with the boxes, stepped in. What she didn't see was that the elevator had gone too far up and she fell all the way down the bottom of the shaft. But that didn't kill her. So, of course, the other girls luckily had seen what happened, and they called the police and the fire department. They went in, and what's the first thing they did? They pushed the button. And so they could hear the screaming, and they thought that the girl was injured inside the elevator. And so as the elevator was coming down, they could hear screaming and screaming and screaming. And by the time it got down to the bottom, the screaming had stopped. The doors opened. There was no girl. As the elevator came down, of course, it crushed her to death. So here's a Catacombs story. This one doesn't involve students. As a matter of fact, it involves a murderer. This story takes place back in the 50s. During the Christmas break, one of those winters when we were having that long, long fog, a condemned murderer escaped from the county jail in Martinez as he was being transferred to San Quentin, where he would have gone to the gas chamber. The following day, following night, he made his way over here to St. Mary's in Moraga. The sheriffs were hot on his tail, and they chased him up the main drive and up toward the chapel. He ran down toward the dining room, Oliver Hall, jumped over the edge of the fence in front of Oliver Hall, and he went into the entrance of the catacombs. So in those days, there was a large, completely cement room in which all of this distribution machinery and things like that was kept. And it looked like a set of the old Frankenstein movies with all the levers and dials and switches and various pieces of wire and those things. Frightening, spooky, and absolutely dangerous. Well, the sheriffs were coming from either side, and unfortunately, the murderer made a wrong turn. It was dark at the time, and suddenly there was a flash like fireworks, and they heard a long, blood-curdling scream. The murderer had run smack into the electrical machinery, and he didn't need to make a trip to San Quentin.